So let's look at Packet Tracer Activity 3.2.4.6. Now, this is not one where we are going to make changes. We are going to investigate things, which means we get to play with a new mode of Packet Tracer that I really love called Simulation Mode. And you can see over here the instructions, and I've already read through them, and I'm going to follow them relatively closely. We'll see how that actually turns out. Okay, but before I dive into that, let's take a look at what we've got. We have a web server, we have a web client. Okay, cool. It's easy enough. Down here, I want you to see this. We have real-time mode, which is the default mode for Packet Tracer. We also have simulation mode. Simulation mode lets us do some things that we don't get a chance to do otherwise that are really, really cool. So I'm going to click on simulation mode, and that's going to pop up this simulation panel. And obviously, if you're doing it without this whole thing here, it's easier to see. But what we can do in simulation mode is it basically pauses activity. And we get to advance this piece by piece, second by second. It's actually not even full second. Step by step, and see how the network functions. So I'm going to click this event list button, and that's, well, let me bring it back. The event list button is going to show or hide this event list. Down here in event list filters, we can see visible events. See, right now we're only looking at HTTP events. So I'm going to click this edit filter so we can see here. And we can select specific protocols for IPv4 or IPv6 or anything else that we want to see. And you'll see right here HTTP is the only one that's selected. And that's fine. We're going to leave it that way for the moment. So I'm going to click on my web client. I'm going to click on my desktop and web browser. There it is. And I'm going to navigate to www.osi.local. And this is going to allow us to see what happens when we actually execute this. So I'm going to click go. Now, nothing happens here. It doesn't load the page. Don't worry about it. Do not close this. We're just going to minimize this. Now, we've put in the request, and now we get to advance this and see what happens. I'm going to minimize this for a minute, maximize this. And so I can advance this one step at a time. So this will let me forward, this will let me play. And now I'm going to see packet by packet, frame by frame what happens. So I've got a PDU here, and now it moves over to here. And we can see it moving back and forth. And that little check mark means everything went great. All right, now in our event list, you can see we've had 4 things. So let's start with this first one. We're going to go to the web client. And on this one, this frame, this packet, whatever we want to call it, starts out here. And we've got, starting out at the web client, and we have the OSI model tab and the outbound PDU tab. So if I click on the OSI model, if I click on each one of these layers, I get to see what's happening at this particular step. So here, the HTTP client sends an HTTP request to the server. At layer 4, we send segment information, sequence number 1, ACK number 1, data length 102. Number 3, this is what we're doing. At layer 2, this is what we're doing. So this is all what's happening at the OSI model. If I click the outbound PDU details, it's going to show me my actual PDU. So here's my Ethernet framing, here's my IP framing, here's my TCP framing, here's my TCP framing, including source port, destination port, sequence number, acknowledgement number, my HTTP request. I can see all my flags that are set in each one of these frame headers. The IP, I get to see the TTL. I get to see the source and destination IP addressing. Now as I go to the next one, we'll see this. Here's my transmission. The device takes this frame off from the buffer and sends it. And here it goes over. Now I see 3 things here. I have the OSI model, both in and outbound. So here's my inbound information. The server receives an HTTP request. The outbound layer, the server sends back the HTTP reply. Layer 4, the device receives the TCP push ACK segment and gives a bunch of information about it, which we're going to go through a lot of this information in detail later on in the course, so don't worry about it. Layer 4 going out, this is what we've got. And again, we have this time inbound PDU details and outbound PDU details. PDU is a protocol data unit. Basically, at the Ethernet level, layer 2, it's called a frame. The PDU there is called a frame. The PDU at layer 3 is called a packet. The PDU at layer 4 is called a segment. Okay, so now with that information, I'm going to reset this simulation real quick. With that information, let me pull up our, there we go. Pull up our packet tracer instructions here. So with that information, now you can go through and you can answer a lot of these questions. Click next layer. Layer 4 should be highlighted. What's the destination port? What's the destination IP value? So now you know how to find the answer to all of those questions. Now I'm just going to walk through this again real quick. You pull up my, give this, and then I'll pull up my web client. And hey, what do you know, it worked. So we'll click, or we'll type www.osi.local. And we'll trigger this again. Now, when I did it before, I hit this, which just played it. This will take it step by step. And it will pause it at each step. And so now you can click on the PDU over here, or you can click on the PDU over here and see the same thing. Layer 7, next layer, layer 4, next layer, layer 3, next layer, layer 1. And you get to see it both inbound and outbound. Okay. So let's take this one step farther. I'm going to reset my simulation again, and I'm going to edit my event list. No, edit my event list right here, edit filters. And I'm going to just do this the easy way, actually. I'm just going to click show all. And that'll give me everything. Now let me do this again. Wrong button. This is one that I want. www.osi.local. And now before we were only capturing HTTP information, now we're going to see a whole lot more. So here we're starting out with DNS. And the client sends a DNS query to the DNS server. And here's the information about the DNS, layer 4, layer 3, layer 2, and layer 1. Let's go ahead and advance that one step. We're going to get a DNS query to the server. If we look at that, the inbound is going to be the DNS query. The outbound is going to be the DNS server finds the domain and sends back a response. And we'll see that happen all the way through. And on our outbound PDU details, we can go all the way back down to our DNS answer and see the data that's being included. This was our query. This is our answer. And you'll get to see all of that information. Okay. Let me go ahead and close that, and we're going to advance. The DNS request is going to come back. We're going to send a TCP response back. Here's going to be an HTTP query and the page. So you get to see what's going on here in a lot more detail. Now, be aware that with everything turned on, you're going to see things that are not necessarily germane to this conversation and displaying a web page. The things that are germane to displaying the web page are pretty much going to be the DNS and the HTTP information. Okay, so that should give you enough information to go through and explore this. And we could have gone through and answered all of those questions, but I actually want you to be able to go through and answer them and let you dig into that and explore that a little bit more. This is something we're going to come back to, and we can view this not just when we're going through some of these specific activities, but with anything that we're doing in Packet Tracer. We can always flip it to simulation mode, and we can look at data in simulation mode and see how data is moving through our network at every layer of the OSI model. So hopefully this will be useful. I genuinely hope it will be. I think it is a great tool for helping to learn and understand the way networks function. So dig in to the instructions in the Packet Tracer activity, answer all of the questions, and it'll give you your first step in understanding how network communications really work.